people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, we'll start with this. The boxing fans are upset as DAZN plans 4 pay-per-views before Christmas as fans cancel in outrage. Boxing fans are in for an exceptionally busy, albeit expensive holiday season as DAZN schedules 4 major pay-per-view events before Christmas, with a 5th potentially landing just after December 25th. The upcoming pay-per-view boxing calendar
got Parker versus Wardley, Eubank versus Ben 2, Benavidez versus Yard, and potentially Chisora versus White for a combined cost of $240, not even counting the $224 it takes for a yearly subscription, coming to a total cost of $464 in what little time remains this year, because that's not counting what other pay-per-views they've already put on. This is just from now to the end of December.
Adding to the festive congestion, a showdown between Naoya Inoue and Alan Picasso could hit DAZN pay-per-view just 2 days after Christmas, creating a full month of marquee matchups for fans to keep pace with. But because Turkey LL Sheik is the one putting that on,
that might be a pay-per-view. It would seem that Turkey lied when he said that they were moving away from the pay-per-view model and moving forward, they would make fights more accessible to the fans. That was supposed to start with Benavidez versus Yard, except that that's a pay-per-view.
So in all likelihood, the Night of the Samurai might be a pay-per-view as well, unless you sign on for this premium subscription, which is essentially more money out of your pocket. All of these pay-per-views sit behind DAZN's $224.99 year subscription, a figure many fans have criticized as steep, especially when stacked with multiple pay-per-views in rapid succession. The timing is ironic given Turkey LL Sheik's public promise earlier this year to abolish extra pay-per-view costs, allowing subscribers access to all major bouts without additional charges. That pledge so far remains unfulfilled. And this is how Zuffa Boxing, upon their launch, may be able to get a leg up on the competition next year. No, they won't have the familiar faces or marquee fighters.
But they won't have the steep pay-per-view prices either. When it was the PBC on Showtime and Fox, I didn't hesitate to call it out. And now that it's DAZN,
I won't hesitate to call it out now. They're doing too much. Way too fucking much. You think in the 2 months that remain of this year, people have got it in their budget to buy all these pay-per-views? Many boxing enthusiasts have begun voicing their displeasure, and some are canceling their subscriptions altogether, saying, so much for Turkey, moving it away from pay-per-view. I've canceled mine too. You're paying £15 a month for small hall shows, and £20 a go for everything else. It's become ridiculous, said one disgruntled customer. Another said, I canceled my DAZN subscription expeditiously. I'm tired of the bullshit. I usually like going legit, but all these different subscriptions for little real value are getting ridiculous. 4 pay-per-views on the run-up to Christmas and not even a discount for subscribers.
A test of DAZN's loyalty for the streaming service, the end-of-the-year pay-per-view schedule is a gamble. On one hand, DAZN can drive subscriptions and generate significant revenue from marquee fights. On the other hand, fans may grow frustrated with the rapid-fire schedule and added costs. In the streaming era, binge-watching a single pay-per-view weekend is common, but multiple high-cost events in quick succession risk viewer burnout
and cannibalization. In a situation where the customer cannot afford to pay out to see all these pay-per-views, they may prefer one over the others. At which point, because these pay-per-views are scheduled so close together, one event may cannibalize the others.
I would say that is the November show, headlined by David Benavidez and Anthony Yard. That one might sell better than every other pay-per-view that surrounds it.
With Parker vs. Wardley kicking things off this weekend and Chisora vs. White 3 slated for mid-December, DAZN's strategy seems clear. Saturate the market with premium fights to dominate the holiday sports calendar. Whether fans will welcome the packed schedule or recoil at the price tag remains to be seen.
But you know that it's just like that other guy said, that you're basically paying what you're paying for what are small hall shows. We know that a series of smaller promotional outfits like Dream Boxing, Ensalita, GBM, they also do shows on DAZN, but it would seem that's what you're really paying for. The small shows, the big ones, cost extra.
I would say that the only fight on the calendar that's not a pay-per-view that looks like value for money would have to be the Diego Pacheco versus Kevin Lele Sajo fight all the way out there in December.
That's it.
The other fights like Virgil Ortiz versus Erickson Lubin or Joshua Buatsi versus Zach Parker, that's not bang for your buck. Those are filler fights, mean in between time fights. Is that what you're paying for? $225 a year.
That's steep.
And DAZN as a platform has strayed far enough from their initial sales pitch that it needs to be said. They are inundating the boxing fans with pay-per-view after pay-per-view to the point where it's absurd.
They used to say that pay-per-view is dead?
Just to resurrect it themselves, like Lazarus from the grave, except that you can't have any real aspirations of continuing to grow as a platform, least of all in America, when you're charging everybody for practically everything.
So I reiterate, this is how Zuffa Boxing might be able to get a leg up on the competition when they launch next year, because they're not going to be doing pay-per-view. Granted that there may not be many familiar fighters or familiar names on their side of things, but curiosity in tandem with affordability
might funnel at least some disgruntled boxing fans to their side of things to see what they've got. And not just them, but MVP also. MVP has put on a series of small cards, and we know they've got the big one next month.
None of which are pay-per-views.
Jake and Gervonta will be broadcasted at no additional charge to all existing Netflix subscribers. In tandem with Amanda Serrano's big ring return at the beginning of next year, I'd wager that's not going to be a pay-per-view either, which could theoretically endear them to the boxing fans, that they're putting on shows and it's not costing you anything extra.
So who are the main culprits here? Who is it specifically we need to be angry at? I would say it's Turki El Sheikh for going back on his word, and Frank Warren for abusing the pay-per-view model. Since he landed on DAZN, he billed Moses Atelma versus Dillian White as a pay-per-view, Parker versus Wardley this weekend, and theoretically, Chisora versus White.
3 pay-per-views back-to-back, and he hasn't even been there all that long.
At the risk of sounding ungrateful, I've enjoyed all the mega matches that Turki has made possible, but no one would have anything to be angry about if he hadn't have made that initial promise to move away from this model. Instead, he's moved towards it. And this is the main driver for the uptick in piracy we've seen in the last 10 years. Too many pay-per-views that cost too much.
A content creator can always purchase a pay-per-view, then flip it, and get their money back by doing a live stream during the broadcast. I mean, that's what I do, but your average Joe doesn't have that option. So when you ask them for $60, then 60 more, then 4 times before the year is out,
they're gonna tell you to go fuck yourself and jump on the nearest illegal stream.
This is what shrunk the audience for boxing in America. Too many paywalls, too many pay-per-views, too many greedy fighters, too many greedy boxing people.
Do what you want. It's your money, it's your show. But the boxing fans, they're gonna do what they want.
Elsewhere in the world of boxing, Eddie Hearn says Shakur's skills will neutralize Teofimo's size in potential 2026 clash. We were talking about the size of Teofimo Lopez. He's not a massive 140, but he's still a decent-sized 140, said promoter Eddie Hearn to Brian Custer's channel. I said to Shakur Stevenson, you'll be the smaller guy in that fight. No, I won't, he said. You will be. Shakur might not be the smaller guy, but he'll be giving away a lot in the power department. That counts for the same thing as him giving away size. Lopez, 5'9", has a 1-inch height advantage over the 5'8" Shakur.
What's this, according to BoxRec?
And a half an inch in reach. I said, I don't think it'll necessarily affect anything. I think you'll win the fight. That's when it starts to be a real challenge when you are fighting a bigger guy, said Hearn about his conversation with Shakur being the smaller fighter at 140. In truth, we may not even get this one. We may not even see this thing, since Teofimo Lopez has emerged as a potential opponent for Manny Pacquiao.
So we could potentially get Teofimo versus Manny Pacquiao.
I don't know if Pacquiao wants to fight a guy at that level at this age. And look at the Mario Barrios fight. Literally, he took that fight because he was like, oh, I could beat that guy. And damn well, he almost did. And probably a lot of people did think he did. Teofimo's not that guy. He's not watching Teofimo Lopez and goes, I could beat that guy. No way.
Besides money, like what does it indicate too? Is it at 140? Because I believe that Pacquiao should only be fighting now to like break history. He should be trying to get that welterweight title. So if it's either Barrios or Rolly, that makes sense.
A legitimate question from Dan Canobio of CompuBox. If Manny were to fight Teofimo in his next fight, at what weight would they fight? You'd be asking what? A 47-year-old Manny Pacquiao to drop down to 140? How many years has it been since he made that weight? And can he make it now? Or is it that Teofimo would be the one that moves up?
On the premise that Manny Pacquiao has so much star power, so much marquee value, that you don't need for there to be a belt on the line.
I would consider that, and according to Hoyle Duck, a textbook duck, that if you have the opportunity to make a big Saudi bag boxing Shakur Stevenson, and you instead elect to fight a 47-year-old Manny Pacquiao instead, a fighter that's close to 50 coming off a draw that hasn't officially recorded a win since 2019.
That's a duck. That's a fucking duck.
You're trying to skip out on a young fighter, unbeaten, who's in his prime, so you can fight a man close to 50 years old. It's not for legacy. There wouldn't be a title on the line. And who would give Teofimo credit for beating this Manny Pacquiao? If they didn't give Jeff Horn credit when he beat Manny years ago, they're not going to give Teofimo credit years later.
They didn't give Jeff Horn credit for beating Manny. They didn't give Ugas credit for beating Manny. So why would they then give Teofimo credit?
Did beating Manny Pacquiao turn Jeff Horn into a megastar? Did it turn Ugas into a megastar? Cut the shit and call a spade a spade. The only lure in Teofimo fighting Manny Pacquiao is that if he's fighting Manny, he's not fighting Shakur, because he doesn't think he can beat Shakur. If it happens that way, and he bails on the Stevenson fight for the Pacquiao fight, that's a duck. So as Eddie Hearn weighs in on why he thinks Shakur Stevenson might win that fight, there may not be a fight for Shakur to win. I mean, for God's sakes, we're almost in November, and they still haven't officially announced it.
So at minimum, we know it's not done yet. We've just been seeing a lot of posturing from the fighters online, but no official announcement, no official date.
Could all turn out to be much ado about nothing. In men's super middleweight news, Hamza Shiraz is linked to a potential Jaime Munguia fight for February. A second look at the potential showdown. Hamza Shiraz's manager, Spencer Brown, has named Jaime Munguia as a potential opponent for his client's expected return to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, earlier next year. The Gold Star Promotions founder told Boxing News earlier today that several more names, including Callum Simpson and Diego Pacheco, were previously discussed as possible opponents for Shiraz, 22-0 with 1 draw and 18 knockouts, with Pacheco now gearing up to face Kevin Lele Sajo on December 13th. It would appear that Munguia and Simpson have emerged as more likely candidates.
It also helps that 2 fights ago, Jaime Munguia was knocked out by a Frenchman with only 5 knockouts.
And that even though Jaime won the rematch, he didn't do to Bruno what Bruno did to him, so that certainly makes him an attractive option for Hamza. Munguia in particular makes for an interesting addition to the conversation, especially when considering his failed VADA test earlier this year. He has since been cleared,
absolved of any wrongdoing, and allowed to resume his boxing career. As it happened, the former world super welterweight champion tested positive for exogenous testosterone, a banned substance, shortly after his wide unanimous decision win over Bruno Surace in May. But while both his A and B sample tests offered the exact same result, it was later revealed that the high-volume puncher had ultimately swerved any form of punishment.
This was because the British Boxing Board of Control, the governing body that oversaw his win over Surace, decided to accept accidental exposure as the explanation for his failed tests. As a result, it would seem there is nothing to stop Munguia from returning to action in February, which is when Brown believes that Shiraz will enter his next outing. The super middleweight contender comes off an emphatic fourth-round finish over Edgar Berlanga this past July, allowing him to blast his way onto the world scene at 168. As of now, Shiraz is the WBC's number 2 ranked contender, just one place in front of Munguia, while Christian Mabili still holds the sanctioning body's interim title.
So yeah, they're looking at Jaime like he's low-hanging fruit. They're looking at Jaime like he's beatable, with good reason. He got beat by a guy with only 5 knockouts. If Bruno packs a big enough punch to put you down, Hamza Shiraz certainly does.
He's a bigger guy than a Bruno Sirache with a bigger punch. There's also the corner situation you want to pay attention to. If Jaime Munguia is still being trained by Eddie Reynoso, I might have to favor Hamza to win this fight, because Eddie's not going to have Jaime throwing caution to the wind, throwing punches and bunches like a Gatling gun. He's going to have Jaime trying to be more of a boxer, more of a technician. I don't think that actually suits Jaime Munguia, least of all in this fight. You're not going to win a technical boxing match with Hamza doing that.
He seemed a bit hesitant with Bruno Sirache, bit cautious. The residual effects of getting knocked out by a guy with 5 knockouts. You don't throw punches with the same confidence. If that hesitance carries over into a Hamza Shiraz fight, Hamza might get him. And understand, I actually think Jaime can hurt Hamza. I think he can knock him out. But if he's hesitant,
Might happen the other way around. I feel that Jaime's best bet to win a fight against Hamza is to do what he usually does and put pressure on the guy. That's his forte. That's what he's good at. That might get him knocked out, but so might the alternative. So just imagine that Hamza Shiraz, having already knocked out Puerto Rico's own Edgar Berlanga, then turns around and knocks out Mexico's own Jaime Munguia. That would go a long way towards legitimizing him in this region of the world. To Americans, it's not enough for a British fighter to beat up on other Brits. They don't really qualify him until he's battering Americans, or at least fighters based out of America. Brits versus Aussies, Brits versus Ukrainians, just Europeans in general. They don't really seem to qualify them until they either fight an American or fight someone that fights in America. Hamza's already done that.
yeah, he knocked out Edgar Berlanga, but Edgar sucks.
Oh, well, he also knocked out a then unbeaten Ammo Williams. He beat him too. If he follows that succession of fights, unbeaten Ammo, Edgar Berlanga, then Jaime Munguia, that might give Hamza an inroad to make a name for himself here in America.
And that in and of itself will carry over across the pond to get him an even warmer reception with the Brits if he's abroad.
Traveling the world, winning fights against international fighters on an international stage, to when he returns home, he'll have a homegrown fan base waiting for him. This works out the right way for Hamza Shiraz. Britain may have a new superstar, perhaps even the face of British boxing, more so than many others.
Hamza's already collected 1 or 2 decent scalps. If he adds the scalp of Jaime Munguia to that collection, he's going the right direction.